show, as well as then just address them all, because I might get multiple questions or asked the same question multiple times and so forth. This should take no more than about a half an hour and so forth. Everyone's contact information is at the end, so if you have a particular question, you can certainly contact us after the webcast. Also, we're going to be recording this, so both the PowerPoint as well as the audio will be sent out to you pretty soon thereafter the conclusion of this particular webcast, so you can share it with others that you choose, just in case you want to make sure that you heard everything as you thought you heard it, and so forth. Now, a little talk about what's happened. We acquired the assets of Life Associates on March 1st, and so a few things, improvements I like to think have happened. One is we got more descriptive participant statements, and they're being mailed to your home address. One less thing that you have to do as a fiduciary to forward those on, and I think participants then like it, getting it directly to their home address. We've moved to MG Trust as what's called the trading agent, and we're going to talk more about this in a moment and so forth, but all of the trades go through MG Trust Company, which is in the process, frankly, of rebranding as Matrix Trust. So as you go forward and you see future legal documents or correspondence from them, you're going to see MG Trust and you're going to see Matrix, and those are really the same company. Also, on some of the documents, it'll mention Broadridge. Broadridge is the publicly held company that owns MG Trust / Matrix and so forth. And you can actually look up Broadridge, since it's publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange, under the symbol BR. So again, this is a firm we've had a contract with for several years, and it was initially set up, the agreement with MG Trust, by Greg Szilagyi, the previous, the bankruptcy trustee and so forth. And so it was a nice coincidence for us that we already had a contract with them, so that's an easy transition. Castle Bank, of course, you're well aware, is resigning as trustee as of December 15th, which was not a surprise for us. The timing might have been, because they never gave us the timeline until they just called me up in September, which was shortly before the time that you received notice saying that they are going to resign on December 15th, which is next Tuesday. So, I always like to discuss when we're talking about changes is, well, what's our ultimate goal? Well, one, we want to name Matrix Trust Company as the custodian and as the directed trustee. So that what does that mean for you? Well, as I mentioned here in the second bullet point, you are going to receive certified plan reporting. And let me expand on that. Let's say that Billings and Company, they're doing your reports. It's going to break down the numbers by participant, by source, by plan, those kinds of things. And our report says that there's $1 million in the plan. Right now, you don't have an independent way to verify that. Once you get on the Matrix system, and I'll explain more on that in a moment, then you will receive certified reporting, which means it's signed off by Matrix saying, yep, you had $1 million or you have $1 million in your plan. And for the last 3 months, because you get them quarterly, for the last 3 months, here's a record of the deposits that you can verify if you wish with your own internal systems, as well as the distributions and any transactions that people move from money back from one fund to the other. So you're going to get that reporting, which helps you satisfy your fiduciary requirements to safeguard the money, and that keeping track of who's buying what and how often and so forth. And then finally, by virtue of going to a certified trustee, for interested plan sponsors, you can do electronic submission and confirmation of contributions. And we already have a few plan sponsors, housing authorities, I think, exclusively so far, who are actually doing the electronic submission, so it is allowed. And I will say, for those sending checks, making a copy of the check verifies that you wrote the check, but you don't get a confirmation of if it was received, and if so, when it was invested. And so the idea of electronic submission of a contribution is that you get an immediate confirm, which again is trying to satisfy your fiduciary requirements of making sure that the money arrived where it was supposed to arrive and invest the way it's supposed to be invested. Okay, so what's going to change as to December 15th? As Castle Bank's going to exit the picture, Right now, for those of you that send money electronically or by paper, you're going to need to send the money directly to the custodian. And by the way, we're going to send, as I mentioned a moment ago, this particular PowerPoint as well as a more detailed matrix description of how to submit contributions really after today. Now, it says here after December 15th, but if you're going to mail a check, today, tomorrow, or Friday, it's not going to probably arrive till then. And, okay, I'll get to that. And so soon, today if possible, start making your checks payable to Matrix Trust Company, and they will be sent either by the U.S. Post Office to their box there in Denver, or overnight, if you so decide their address there on 17th Street. The most important thing to remember on either the overnight or the check is to have our TPA number, our third-party administration number with Matrix, which is 348, and then mention your plan name. And this will be mentioned, I think, on the Broadridge submission. If you're sending in two kinds of contributions, one for the 457, one for the 408, I realize not everyone has two plans, you can combine them or you can do them separately. And by the way, if you're going to mail it in, normally you mail in a breakdown of that. You mail the breakdown along with the check to Matrix. What they do is they scan it in to our private portal that we have as a TPA member of theirs, and so we can actually look at it, process it, and so Carrie can make the deposit just like she normally does. So actually this is going to be much more efficient because when you were sending into Chicago, we had to put them in the bank at Castle Bank. It had to clear Castle Bank and then get the money in there, and we were going to Matrix Trust anyway. So this will be, again, trying to satisfy your fiduciary responsibilities to make sure that it gets there. And so forth. And if you do it overnight, then of course you'll have a tracking number. If you do it electronically, then you get an immediate confirm and so forth. But again, we'll be sending out a more detailed breakdown from Matrix and Broadridge, because I think they're on the letterhead as well, and so forth, that you can keep with you and use in the future. If by some chance you're going to mail a check, let's just say on Friday, it's made out to someone other than Matrix Trust, if let's say you make it out to Billings and Company or something, if we get it, I can endorse and move it over. If Matrix gets it, they're going to send it back because, again, they can't accept checks that are made payable through Principal or Life Associates or Billings. So, again, if it comes to us and we can help facilitate getting it in, we're more than happy to do that. But, again, the idea is to get your money invested as soon as you send it in, get your employees earning either interest or gains on their investments. Okay, what other changes are going to happen? And this is going to talk about an email that I sent you fairly recently about the CGF, what I call the fixed contract. One of the processes, I guess if you want to call it, that Life Associates has had for many, many, many years for all of the plan sponsors has been basically two big investment contracts. One would be the separate accounts. They look like mutual funds, but legally they're called separate accounts. And then they had the fixed account, which a large part of the money is involved. And I received a call from Pam Rouse, who's mentioned there on the screen, probably about the middle of November. And she had been advised by their legal counsel that the way it had been submitted to the respective insurance commissioners was it had to have one big happy trustee. And MG Trust, Matrix, won't accept the custodian trustee responsibilities until the IRS amnesty is resolved. And again, I'm going to address that later on here and so forth. So there was a need, there was a void here of a trustee, so I did consult with my legal counsel and said that consented to me become the trustee of the contract. And I wanted to make that clear. Because of Castle Bank's resignation, you may recall executive directors become the individual trustees of their plan. Now, they're already fiduciaries, but they were co-fiduciaries with Castle Bank, and they're going to remain fiduciaries, but now they're going to be the interim trustee until Matrix Trust takes over and so forth. My only involvement is in the contract, the fixed contract only. So therefore, I still can't do anything relative to your plan because that doesn't change. You are still the trustee of the plan, and the only practical thing I'm going to do on this fixed contract is to sign anything, if anything, that comes up from principal between now and the date that Matrix takes over, and then, of course, after that, Matrix would sign the thing. So it will not change in terms of where your money is going. It won't change my ability to change your plan or do anything like that. Now, one of the requirements that principal required or asked and required is that, okay, Dick, fine, you're going to be the trustee. We need consent, or you need consent from each respective plan sponsor that it's okay. So that was requested by me of you, about a week ago. Many of you have already responded. If you have not responded, then I need you to do so here in the next couple of days and so forth, and therefore I can report to principal that been approved. And I'm going to talk about what happens if you don't do that on the next slide here. But let me talk a little bit further here. I wanted to put Pamela Rouse's number and contact information just in the interest of transparency, that I'm not making this up, that if you have some concerns, you have some questions or comments, that you can contact somebody at principal. And as I mentioned in the letter last week, she is simply, she's just the account manager. She's our account manager, and that she is not the legal counsel and so forth. So if you have a particular question, by all means ask her, but she will probably then pass it on to someone else and so forth. So anyway, I wanted you to have that information. And as it says here at the bottom, each individual executive director will remain as trustee of the plan. And that's what's important here, because the trustee of the plan controls what happens within the plan. Okay, what would happen, and I've actually had a couple of questions, which is reasonable. What happens if you disapprove, Richard, that's me, as trustee of the contract as of December 15th? What principal says is they will no longer allow new deposits to go into the fixed account. So if I'm an employee and my election form says put some or all of my new money into the CGF, they will carve that out, and it's just going to sit there for the moment, and I'll come back to that here in a second. And then for those who have existing CGF balances, which would be this active participant, and I'll talk about those of you that are not putting contributions in here in a second, but for those who have existing CGF balances, be they an existing participant or a housing authority that's still here but is not putting new money in and so forth, part of the CGF money would be paid out as of December 31, and then each December 31 thereafter for the next 5 years, because how the contract works in terms of how they look at their balances and so forth, it's kind of like a CD, but that's oversimplification, that the monies are in annual increments. And so, for example, I'm a participant in CGF, and I put in $1,000 5 years ago, then that $1,000 plus of interest, of course, would get paid from the contract, not paid from the plan, which is important then to the third bullet. Disbursement or disgorgement from the CGF would not circumvent the July 2013 court order. Thus, dollars could still not be transferred to the new vendor. They're simply saying money will not be accepted into this investment contract, and so it won't go in there, but it's still in the plan. It's just probably in a cash account, for lack of a better term here. And then from a fiduciary standpoint, each executive director as a trustee would have to inform us, what do you want to do with the money? Now, my guess is you'd put it into the separate accounts, the mutual funds, but again, that's a fiduciary act. It's going to be circumventing what the employee chose. They wanted their money to go to the CGF and so forth. So I'm not saying you can't do it, but as a practical matter, it's going to disrupt a lot of stuff. And so that's the way the contract worked with principal. And again, this will only be, again, you have the same problem when we go to Matrix. If you didn't approve them, it'd be the same issue and so forth. So certainly, especially for the benefit of your employees who either, one, are contributing to the CGF or who have existing balances in the CGF, that you're probably going to want to approve it, simply though you don't have to face that decision as to what to do with the money now that it's being disgorged or simply not being accepted. Okay, as I mentioned a moment ago, voluntary compliance resolution or program, which is called the VCP. Now, this is totally separate from the demutualization issue that surrounded Life Associates and Richard Zachman. One of the issues that when I started looking at the books, and again, this was already known by Life Associates and the bankruptcy trustee, was that Life Associates didn't really balance their books. And the analogy would be this. You don't balance your checkbook. You get your statement from the bank. There's a little fee there. There's a little interest there, but you don't change your check register. Then, of course, over time, it may not be a large amount, but it'll be very difficult to fix because it's a bunch of little transactions that occurred over many years. And that's what happened at Life Associates. They did not properly account for all of the activity that happened in the plan. So therefore, if I go into my computer today and I say, Carrie, tell me how much money is in all of the plans that are all of the housing authorities, and then I know you're not all housing authorities, but all the plan sponsors, I'm going to get one number. And then I'm going to call up Principal and say, how much money, Principal, do you have in these two contracts? The amount they give me from Principal is going to be less than the amount of money that's shown on our records. Now, again, this was known way back, I think, in 2010 when the bankruptcy occurred. So the bankruptcy court retained Karen Brandon of Ogletree Deacons, which is a law firm there in Chicago, and on February 28th of 2014, Karen filed what's called this VCP application. What its intent was to adjust employee account balances so they agree with total assets at principal. Now, the discrepancy or difference varies every day. It's between 0.5% and 1%. So it's not a huge number per person, but over 1,600, I think, participants, it's a large number in total and so forth. And I've been in contact with Karen. I know some of you may have contacted her recently, and I talked to her as recently as last week, and she is negotiating details, and then she is making a formal response to the IRS yet this month. She didn't give me a timeline, and Karen has requested a timeline from the IRS, but none has been given yet. Now, so what's going to happen when the VCP happens, okay, and if we get approval, and let's say we got approval today, then we're going to have to implement it. And we're going to do a process, obviously informing Karen Brandon, keep them informed, the bankruptcy court, as well as all of the housing authorities, and through them to their employees, letting them know what's happening and when it's going to happen, because you don't want to just see this adjustment on your statement and no one have any idea. So even if the request happened today, my guess is it would be at least the first quarter before we could actually implement it. All right? So let's say the VCP is received in the first quarter. It may not be until the second quarter that it happens. So anyway, if you have specific questions, by all means, let us know. And also be aware that there was a letter sent out. In fact, I got a question on that just the other day. On January 10th, there was a letter that Greg Szilagyi sent out that said, tried to describe this in some detail. So if you can't find that, by all means, let us know, and I do have a copy of that. Just to let you know, and again, I've talked to many about this. We're going to have webcasts on this, as well as obviously personal contacts and so forth. But I wanted to give you something a little more in writing here, is that even though as a governmental entity exempt from a large part of ERISA, and you're not exempt from all of ERISA, because, for example, you have to have a written plan document and so forth, but you are exempt from a lot of ERISA, but you still have to deal with state fiduciary responsibility, so you're still a fiduciary. One of the things that's been popular in the industry, and we're offering as well to our clients, is taking on some of those fiduciary responsibilities so that you have less oversight on a day-by-day basis. And I'll just give you two examples that are popular. One is managing the menu of funds, okay, which I'm going to talk more about that here in a minute. In other words, which 2 funds or which 20 mutual funds, whatever you're going to offer your employees and so forth, and to manage that responsibility, because that is a legal responsibility of not only the fiduciary but the plan sponsor, since they employ the trustee. and so forth. And then the other is what we call administrative responsibilities, signing certain documents, signing benefit applications, those kinds of things, the day-to-day stuff that generally in our case for our clients, and we, by the way, have about 500 clients around the country, that they want to move on and make their widgets and not have to worry about this. That would then leave you with two responsibilities. One is to make sure that the fees are reasonable, and two, to retain the right to hire and fire your advisors, because again, you can't give away all of your fiduciary responsibility. Next, we've been offering this for some time now, but it's going to continue into next year, is the on-site employee education. David Franco is a person we know here in Sioux City, but has a history working with JP Morgan and very large retirement plans in educating employees and understanding whether they're adequately prepared for retirement. Because yes, they're getting a nice contribution from their employer in the 401A, they're going to get Social Security and so forth, but is that enough? And for some, it will be. Others, it won't. And so what David's idea is to educate employees to say, you know, if you're not going to have enough based upon current trends, the best time to find that out is now and not the day before your retirement. So we offer that at no additional cost, and I know David's already got some meetings around the country lined up for January and so forth. So if you have any questions, his contact information is going to be on the last slide, as well as you can talk to Carrie as well. And then future webcasts, we're talking about enhanced fund lineups. For whatever reason, well, I know the reason, but the history of Life Associates was 28 principal separate accounts / mutual funds and the fixed. Now, principal is a good fund family. So is American Funds. So is T. Rowe Price. So is Vanguard. Lots of different ones are good, and no one mutual fund family has all the best funds in every asset class all the time. So most of, well, actually all of our other clients, with a few exceptions, have their money. They might have the growth money in one family. They might have the fixed money in another, and so forth. So we're going to be offering a large menu of funds for those whom are interested. And one of the things we're also going to do, I've been in contact with Principal, your Principal funds, you've heard me say the term separate accounts, because they are legally not mutual funds. They are contained within a group annuity, which in and of itself isn't a bad thing, but for example, employees can't follow the values of that particular fund in the newspaper or whatever, and it simply doesn't need to be an insurance-related product. So, and again, we'll be advising you this. We aren't going to do this automatically, but recommending you go to what are called SEC-registered principal mutual funds, just like you find out on that are traded on the New York Exchange today and so forth. One is because they're registered by the SEC, so they're more regulated. They'll have a prospectus if an employee really wants to get detailed information about it. And also, in some cases, they're actually going to be less expensive in that. And some of the funds are identical. In other words, it's the same growth fund or it's the same fixed fund. It'll be called a little bit different. Cost may be the same, may be different, but it'll be a SEC-registered principal mutual fund, which is traded on an exchange and every day. So, again, that'll be an enhancement that we'll be bringing on. The last thing here is just contact information. There's our toll-free number, a website, and most of you know Carrie Breadwell-Zachman, and that's her extension. Mike Hahn, who is our relationship manager, he actually is in Chicago now. I'm in Iowa, which is our main office in Sioux City, Iowa, and then employee education manager, David Franco. You can contact him there at extension 3019. Okay, just bear with me a moment. Okay, if you have questions, please put them in the chat window, and I will address them. All right, there's no questions coming in right yet, but we're going to wait here for a minute or two. So again, take your time. If you have a question, we'll be waiting here for just a few moments. Okay, we have a question is, as I suspected, somebody's about ready to send the money in here like today or tomorrow. I would suggest what you do is you make the check payable to Matrix, but send it to Carrie. And what she'll do is she'll just make sure, because again, if it gets delivered tomorrow, then they, meaning Matrix, isn't going to be able to handle it. So to make it payable to Matrix Trust Company and send it to our address there in Aurora, Suite 457 Executive Drive, or 75 Executive Drive there in Aurora. I did get another question, is the CGF the same thing as the HUD custodial CGF? And the answer is yes, it is the same contract. Okay, another question is, some of our deduction is going. Question is, a number of the plan sponsors also have the plan pay for insurance. I realize that you send the check directly to an insurance company, but that's just a bookkeeping shortcut. It's still technically being paid for by the plan. And is anything being changed relative to the insurance at this time? And the answer is no. You recall that it was changed from Principal in 2012 to Transamerica. That remains the life insurance carrier. And, of course, you haven't made any amendments to your plan that indicate that the benefit levels are different. So, yeah, nothing will change relative to that. Now, what I think also, though, your question may be is, well, gosh, now we're sending checks to Matrix. Do we send the checks for the insurance to Aurora? And if you're sending them separate, which I'm assuming you are, if you're doing that bookkeeping shortcut, then you will continue to send that insurance check to Aurora. And again, we'll explain that with the attachment that we're going to send out here this afternoon. But good question. Question was, will the VCP, this amnesty, this adjustment, apply only to those who were in funds at the time of the error? And the answer is no, and let me explain. The analogy I gave a moment ago was you didn't balance your checkbook for, let's say, a year or two, and the number of transactions that made it off from the bank statement were 10 cents one month, $1 the next month, 50 cents the next month, or whatever. It was an accumulation so that when you get done adjusting it, it may be a $25 adjustment. That's exactly what happened with Life Associates. It wasn't just one big happy mistake on a given day. It was an accumulation of little tiny non-balancings, I guess, if you want to call it, over many, many years. I don't even know how many years, but a lot of years and so forth. And when you do VCP, when you do an application, and I've done a number of clients and guided them through the VCP process, because you can't literally go back and find each person for each deposit, for each transaction back for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, what the VC application commonly does, and that was true here for Karen Brandon, was to propose a quote-unquote reasonable, and we can all debate the meaning of that word, a reasonable way to allocate this loss/adjustment, because it's going to be a negative number and so forth. So for better or worse, whether you have a participant in the plan since last Tuesday or you have a participant in the plan that's been there for 20 years, and I don't recall the exact details, but hypothetically say it's a 1% adjustment, both of those hypothetical employees will be adjusted by 1%. Now, clearly, the person who's only been in since next Tuesday is going to have a very, very, very small adjustment, and the person who's been there a long time who has a larger balance, as a dollar amount, will have a larger amount, but as a rate of their account will be the same. So this is yet to be worked out, but what I've seen in past experiences, VCP is approved today. We implement it, let's just say February 1st, pick a day. Then whoever's got money in the plan on February 1, now it may be a date earlier than that and so forth, is going to receive it. We'll wait here for a moment if there's any more questions. All right, another question is whether our fees would be reduced, and the answer is, well, it depends. Now, that's obviously not a direct answer. One of the things that we're trying to do is reduce the cost of the program overall. Most of the cost that you have in this program is actually the mutual fund costs. And so as I mentioned a moment ago, we're going to talk about the principal funds. And a lot of the fund costs are 70, 80, 90, 100 basis points is 1/10 of 1%, or 1/100th of 1%. So if I say 80 basis points, that's 0.8%. Many mutual funds are at around 8, 90, 100 basis points, 1%. And a lot of our clients in our other book of business has been moving to less expensive mutual funds, such as T. Rowe Price, such as Vanguard, and so forth. So relative to the mutual fund costs are the first thing we're going to worry about. One of the things that Life Associates did on the billings fee or their fees and so forth is they charged everybody globally the same amount. And again, I'll give you more details on that, but that's the platform that they've done and so forth. So we will be looking at that certainly because we know we have to compete and we want to keep your business, that we need to do that. The question was, what is the amount being adjusted? And the answer is the total balances. So for example, I'm a participant. I have $10,000 in my account. I have $4,000 in the separate account mutual funds, and I have $6,000 in the CGF, or whatever my proportion is. If at the end of the day the adjustment is 1%, it will be $100 in total on $10,000, and some will come out of the mutual fund separate accounts, and some will be that, but it'll be the total account balance. Another question is, well, will the in-service distribution be offered? In any retirement plan, it's whatever the document says. So for example, if a plan participant calls me today and says, hey, I would like to take an in-service distribution, we'll look to the plan, or Carrie does, or I will, whatever, and say, yep, you can do it, or you can't. Now the law has restrictions on taking in-service depending on the sources of your money, whether you're under 62 or under 59.5, so it will vary. But the plan document and the law dictate whether or not in-service distribution. It's not me, it's not Carrie. The question is, here's the question. Can the sponsor vote no to the trustee, this question that I've asked you in the last week to respond to, and then contract directly with principal as trustee, and then not to be assessed a billings fee? Probably the short answer is yes, but here's a couple caveats. Principal has never been the trustee, nor will they be your trustee if you contract with them directly. You're either going to be your own trustee, or you'll have to find someone else, like a corporation, to do it for you, which of course they'll charge you a fee. Also, these are retirement plans. These are not just individual brokerage accounts that you might have personally. Therefore, you have to follow a plan document. You have to follow certain parts of ERISA. You have to follow certain procedures. So on the assumption that an individual housing authority or plan sponsor doesn't want to do that, they're going to delegate it to somebody else, and that somebody else is going to charge a fee. Whether it's more or less will depend on lots of different factors. But the answer directly to your question is yes, but you're going to have to find a trustee, and principal won't be the one, but you can certainly ask them. Quite the question. Good questions, I appreciate too. Where is the money that is being adjusted going to? The money that's being adjusted doesn't exist. And again, the analogy would be this. You didn't balance your check register, and the bank says you have $100 in your account. That's what the bank says. And your check register says you have $102 in your account. So you make a $2 adjustment in your check register. That's exactly the analogy at principal. They, meaning Life Associates, up till roughly 2010, had overstated or told you that you had more money than you actually did. So the adjustment is certainly a negative number, but again, in my analogy for the check register, it's not money that's going anywhere because it's never existed. It's just that they didn't balance the books with what the system, that's our accounting system here, collectively never balanced that with what the total assets were at principal. Question, are we able to get a new TPA or are we tied to this plan? Well, like most answers in retirement plan world, it depends. I think I mentioned it earlier in today's talk. There was a court order sought by the bankruptcy court and received in July of 2013, which prohibited plan sponsors to withdraw their assets. The reason that was issued by the court is that, again, there's this 1% hypothetical adjustment to the assets, and so if everybody but one plan sponsor was allowed to leave, then the remaining plan sponsor and their participants would have to eat all of the remaining balances. Okay, so for the time being, until the court order is lifted, and the court order won't be lifted until after the VCP is approved and implemented, okay, until that time, for better or worse, you're stuck with us. Now, obviously, we want to keep you, and so forth, but certainly it's your plan, it's your money. One of the things, of course, if you withdraw from us as a TPA, you'll withdraw from the contracts, which is neither good nor bad, but then you'll be seeking contracts, investments elsewhere, which is one reason why we're going to expand the investment options, because, again, if you do look across the street, you're going to see Vanguard and T. Rowe Price and American Funds and those, and so we certainly want to earn your business and so forth, and we need to compete, obviously, with our vendors across the street, and that's why we're going to offer hopefully better options and less expensive options, but again, as a reason to stay. Question is, who is responsible for the plan document update? That is us. We inherited that, if you will, from Life Associates. They were what's called a prototype plan document sponsor, as are we, and so forth. And so when the IRS mandates that plan documents be updated, we will be the ones to do that. And I think the deadline, because we're in another round of restatements, you may or may not be aware of that, the deadline, I believe, is May of 2016. And so forth. So we will be doing that and submitting them along with, again, these MG matrix contracts and so forth to update the plans as necessary. Could we withdraw our assets? This is the question. Could we withdraw our assets if we left 1% behind, since that seems to be the maximum cost for the adjustment? The answer is no, because of the court order. The court order says 0 assets are to leave, exceptions being where employees exercise their ERISA rights by terminating or withdrawing their assets under an in-service. Okay. Question. What are the billings fees? Well, first of all, you might have noticed on the participant statements that we've been issuing since June 30th. That was the first quarter that we did the statements. It shows that fee as a dollar amount that comes out of each person's account. But just to give you a number, it's the same fee that Life Associates is charging, because, again, it's the same system. It happens to be 1.1% of the assets. And that's obviously 1/4 of its charged in each quarter. Question, what fiduciary responsibility does Billings assume of the plan and operations? As a fiduciary, well, let me back up. A fiduciary is defined as a person or entity that has discretionary authority over the plan assets. As of today, I have no discretionary authority over the plan assets. I'm not named in any of the plan sponsor documents as a trustee or a fiduciary or whatever. So I'm not a fiduciary to the plan because the plan doesn't grant me that right. Now, relative to the investment contract, the fixed contract, I will have some fiduciary responsibility because I'll have to sign documents. But again, it's fixed money. You're sending your money directly to the custodian. I'm not even going to see it, and so forth. So one could argue I have some fiduciary responsibility, but very limited, only from the standpoint of signing contracts or changes or responding to questions and so forth. Now, even as a non-fiduciary, though, I certainly have responsibilities. As a TPA, I have certain responsibilities to making sure that we pay people out according to the plan document, that we do things correctly. And that would be true with any vendor that provides you a service. And if for some reason we do it incorrectly, then we would be responsible under state law and under our errors and omissions policy. Question, you said we could vote no and contract directly with principal for the fixed. Isn't that leaving the plan? I should have caveated my question. The answer is yes, once the VCP is received and implemented and the court order is lifted. So prior to that time, could you vote no? Yeah. And you could direct the money within another contract. I'm not sure. The only other contract you'd have that exists today is the separate accounts, the mutual funds. So if you decided as a trustee to put that new CGF money, if you will, or the one that gets disgorged and put it into the mutual funds, you could certainly do that. Question, so if we vote no and do not direct it, what would happen? Well, the money would sit there, earning zero, for which that would be a fiduciary decision, because doing nothing is a fiduciary decision as well as doing something. These are good questions. I appreciate that. The question is, if we decide to terminate our plan, is that a triggering event allowing for assets to be distributed? I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know the definitive answer, but now terminating services with principal or billings is different than terminating the plan. So let's forget the VCP and all this other stuff. If you as the plan sponsor decide to terminate the plan, which you are certainly at will to do, you're not obligated to keep it, then that means you're distributing all the assets to the employees, which they will either put in their pocket and pay tax, or they roll it to an IRA. So can you terminate the plan? The first answer is yes. And it would allow for the assets to be distributed. However, I would say that the court order has to mean something, and that would be something for your corporate counsel to help you with in terms of would it mean withdrawing the funds from the pool, if you want to call it that exists at principal. The court order didn't provide for that exception, so I would venture to say that it's not allowed. Okay, I'm going to wait here just for a minute if there's any more questions, but again, appreciate that, and certainly if we don't get everyone's questions answered, by all means, certainly give us a call, send us an email, whatever works, because certainly we want to help you in understanding the options and the situation as much as possible. And again, this is going to be recorded, so we're going to be sending out later today along with more specific instructions on making contributions going forward to your plan. Another question is about they got legal counsel, which has some disagreements or different interpretations of the court order. I'd have to tell you, you should contact Karen Brandon, who's the one who did the VCP, and Greg Szilagyi, by the way, who's the bankruptcy trustee and is an attorney for that. But the court order was sent out, and whatever the two of you would work out is not, I'm going to follow whatever corporate counsel is going to say. All right. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. I haven't got any more questions and so forth. But again, thank you all for your patience in all the process of the Life Associates. And again, I got to hand it to you all in terms of sticking with the programs and so forth and understanding all of this. And again, our job here is obviously to try to make it more, if you will, competitive for the marketplace, and certainly, but in the meantime, to answer your questions as best we can. So by all means, let us know if we can help. And again, we'll look forward to the next webcast. Thank you, and have a good day.